Open borders and open arms. Moments worthy of the silver screen that played out across Queensland from the far north to the southeast. And it actually was all around.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to the last Media Watch of 2020. And what a crazy year it's been to look back on. From bushfires to COVID and all the dramas that followed, with lockdowns, job losses and border closures. So, spare a thought for the intrepid reporters who've covered so many once-in-a-lifetime events.
Thieves have stolen hundreds of rolls of toilet paper. How did they do it?
Well, Pete, just as so many people right across our city have been struggling to get their hands on what has become such a bizarrely precious commodity.
Yes, who can forget the toilet paper panics? And remember the media policing those early days of lockdown.
Why are you sitting inside a cafe?
I'm eating lunch, man. I didn't know I had to take it out.
For most of 2020, there really was no other story, even if some of the angles were ridiculous.
This is a coronavirus-proof underground bunker.
And it could fit a small family.
Purpose-built to protect families from a second wave.
And day after day, we were treated to lengthy press conferences from our leaders.
Andrew, I'm sorry, you've had several questions. Andrew, I'm sorry. Andrew, I know, but you don't run the press conference, OK?
If you were to answer that yes or no, would that be a yes or no?
Well, how I choose to answer your questions is with respect a matter for me.
In Melbourne, reporters sat through the Premier's unbroken run of 120 daily briefings, then took to the parks as Victoria's lockdown eventually showed signs of cracking.
The people here, they're in their hundreds, and this is just an idea of what Melbourne might expect over the weekend as it warms up even more.
And equally giddy with joy were reporters at Brisbane Airport last week as Queensland finally opened its borders.
Hello guys, great to see you. You're on both channels at the same time right now. Hey, let's do a mic slot. There we go. Yeah. Welcome back to the Today Show. What's going on?
And when one family lovingly embraced, the media rivals swarmed.
How are you feeling, Ashley? How good was that hug?
Mate, how special is this to see your daughter again?
Can we have another big hug, please?
And if that wasn't enough, the shocked family were then asked to relive the moment for Tens the Project.
Matt, how great was that moment when you finally got to see Ash and Peyton?
It was pretty good, but yeah, all the cameras and that, I was not really expecting that. That was very overwhelming and, yeah, that's not something I expected.
But there was one big story that brought no joy for the media, and that was the economic fallout. As companies everywhere slashed their advertising budgets and the public broadcaster had its funding squeezed, almost everyone in the media faced job losses.
Small regional newspapers across Australia, some of which have been operating for more than a century, have started to close their doors.
News Corp is hitting pause on the production of 60 community newspapers.
The ABC has begun slashing jobs.
The axe has fallen on several high-profile faces at Channel 10.
AAP, 7, 9, 10, the ABC, ACM newspapers and News Corp all cut media jobs. But regional and rural newspapers were by far the hardest hit. The media union, the MEAA, doesn't have an exact headcount, but it says
COVID has caused 150 print and broadcast newsrooms to close, either temporarily or for good, at the cost of at least 1,000 jobs.
And last month there was more bad news, with News Corp axing 25 editorial staff, including 16 photographers from around the country. For many foreign correspondents, 2020 was also a year of retreat, forced home by the threat of COVID, or in China by something more sinister.
ABC journalist Bill Birtles and Australian Financial Review correspondent Mike Smith fleeing China after coordinated midnight police raids on their homes.
Birtles and Smith were questioned about the activities of another Australian journalist, Chung Lei, who was arrested in August. Lei is now locked up without charge on national security grounds. But there are no Australian correspondents left in China to report that, thanks to the regime's increasing authoritarianism. And in Hong Kong, the communist-inspired crackdown continues, as the ABC reported on Friday.
A court in Hong Kong has denied bail for the media tycoon and democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai after his arrest on fraud charges. Mr Lai, who owns the territory's most prominent opposition newspaper, will now remain in custody until April.
Lai was arrested in August, a month after new laws swept government opposition off the streets.
July 1st, 2020 may be the day Hong Kong's autonomous bubble finally burst. A controversial new law dramatically expanding the Chinese central government's powers in Hong Kong was imposed under cover of darkness.
More than 30 arrests have now been made under this new law, including last month an award-winning TV producer who exposed police misconduct. And last week, 3 pro-democracy demonstrators were jailed for at least 7 months for taking to the streets.
Supporters demonstrated in solidarity today, some hiding their faces out of caution as China cracks down on dissent.
Another big story was the US election, which kept the world gripped for weeks. And a month after the votes were cast, the defeated president is still ranting and raving that he was the real winner.
This election was rigged. This election was a total fraud. And how the FBI and Department of Justice, I don't know, maybe they're involved, but how people are allowed to get away from this stuff with this stuff is unbelievable. The media doesn't even want to cover it.
Last week, the Murdoch's Fox News indulged the defeated president by giving him 45 minutes to spin his baseless claims of fraud, conspiracies and ballot stuffing. And did host Maria Bartiromo push back? Quite the opposite.
This election was a fraud. It was a rigged election.
This is disgusting, and we cannot allow America's election to be corrupted.
Not surprisingly, her interview was heavily criticised, with CNN's media reporter Oliver Darcy calling it reckless and irresponsible.
News organizations, and I think Fox claims to be one, have a responsibility, in this moment in American democracy where the president of the United States is trying to overturn the election, trying to undermine the integrity of our system. They have a responsibility to be very clear with viewers about what's going on. And you're not seeing it on Fox. What you're seeing is executives sign off on people like Maria to go on air, to lie to their viewers, to spin conspiracy theories. And it's outrageous. I don't know what else to say about it. I'm frankly, like I said, out of words.
4 days later, Trump repeated his claims of fraud and theft in a 46-minute video posted to social media, which he called one of the most important speeches he'd ever made.
I am determined to protect our election system, which is now under coordinated assault and siege.
Facebook and Twitter again slapped warnings on his video, while Associated Press described the president as increasingly detached from reality. But time is running out for the presidential pantomime because on 14th of December, the Electoral College will cast its votes. And the key battleground states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin and Arizona, have already certified Biden as the winner. What's more than 30 of Trump's legal cases have now been defeated or withdrawn. So, are any of Trump's sycophantic media supporters in Australia still claiming he's won? Answer, yes. And they're all on Fox's sister network, Sky News.
You won't hear it on the mainstream media, but the simple reality is that the odds of Trump ultimately being declared the winner of this election is no different to what the odds were of George Pell ultimately being found innocent.
In other words, a Trump victory is a certainty, according to Rowan Dean, whose prediction came a day after a crucial legal defeat for Trump in Pennsylvania, and a day before Michigan certified a Biden win, thus removing 2 of the president's last hopes. Yet Dean was deterred by none of this, telling viewers,
think very carefully before you write Trump off. I was here in the Sky studio on election day. We all saw the numbers and Trump was way, way ahead. Graham Richardson even called it for Trump mid-afternoon. Later that night, weird things started happening. Like, in no other election I've ever seen, polling booths inexplicably and simultaneously being shut down, boxes of ballots mysteriously appearing out of the back of Porsches, and we all woke up to find Joe Biden being declared the clear-cut winner. Except it's still not all that cut and dry.
It was crazy stuff, and it soon got crazier, with Dean promoting a conspiracy theory involving dead dictator Hugo Chavez and voting machines that were secretly programmed to record votes for Donald as votes for Joe. 4 days later, Sky's other leading Trumper, Alan Jones, developed the dictator theme by pitching this opening question to another Trump supporter.
David Flint, good evening. Thank you for your time. You make reference to Churchill
following Dunkirk, leading the British in refusing to deal with Hitler. Why should Trump surrender and ignore his rights under the Constitution?
Comparing Trump to Churchill and Biden to Hitler is a seriously strange comparison. But that aside, why would Sky not accept an election result in which Biden won with 80 million votes? Professor Flint's answer, aping Trump, fraud on an industrial scale.
It's not just fraud, and the fraud is self-evident. It would be self-evident to a rookie journalist. I can't understand why journalists are throwing around the word unsubstantiated.
Well, 4 days earlier, a staunch Republican judge, Matthew Brown, had come to precisely that conclusion in Pennsylvania in throwing out Trump's attempt to invalidate almost 7 million votes, telling the court,
"One might expect that when seeking such a startling outcome, a plaintiff would come formidably armed with compelling legal arguments and factual proof of rampant corruption. Instead, this court has been presented with strained legal arguments without merit and speculative accusations unpled in the operative complaint and unsupported by evidence."
And he had added,
"In the United States of America, this cannot justify the disenfranchisement of a single voter, let alone all the voters of its sixth most populated state."
Yet, in spite of that and all the other defeats, David Flint assured Alan Jones,
There's a lot going for President Trump. He has a very good chance, provided that people are courageous, they don't surrender, and they do their duty, particularly the judges.
Good on you. Good to talk to you, David. There you are, Professor David Flint. We'll keep you up to date, saying things as they are rather than as some would like them to be.
And Jones is not giving up. 2 days earlier, he had insisted there was a mass of evidence that just couldn't be revealed.
And, of course, the argument is there's no evidence. Well, the Trump team have evidence, but even if they presented it, it wouldn't be reported. And many of the affidavits can't be presented publicly because people are afraid of being threatened by left-wing extremists.
And last week, Alan upped the ante again with this generous offer.
I will contribute money to charity if anyone can tell me how a bloke who rarely appeared in the campaign, Joe Biden, could possibly, honestly, muster 80 million votes. That's 25% of every man, woman and child in America. Give me a break.
Well, let me tell you, Alan, there was an election, and that was the result. And just about everyone except Donald Trump, Alan Jones and Rowan Dean, who was yesterday claiming fraud again, accept that. For example, before he was fired, Trump's election security chief, Chris Krebs, declared the poll was not rigged and was the most secure in US history. Then last week, another Trump loyalist, Attorney General William Barr, declared there was no evidence of widespread election fraud. And last month, election officials across the USA swore there was no evidence of voter fraud to the New York Times. So, what fantasy land do Alan Jones and Rowan Dean live in that they can just ignore all that? And why does Sky News allow them to keep spouting their nonsense? The answer? Sky News boss Paul Whitaker says it's about diversity. As he told News Corp staff last week,
"We run opinion-based news programming that often shines a light on areas that our competitors either refuse to discuss or, worse, pretend don't exist. This is our brand value proposition that separates us from the dominance of voices on the left of Australian media."
Yep, Sky's brand value proposition goes gangbusters on social media and makes money for the network. It's called unreality TV. It can be very lucrative. And finally, to the word, or should we say words of the year.
Pandemic has been named the top word of 2020.
The boffins at Collins Dictionary, well, they're favouring the word lockdown. The Australian National Dictionary Centre also likes ISO.
According to our own Macquarie Dictionary, doom scrolling is in fact the word of the year.
And what on earth is doom scrolling?
The act of continually, almost mindlessly scrolling through news feeds, despite it all being predominantly negative and upsetting.
Sounds like what we do every day. And it seems ISO doom scrolling in a pandemic lockdown inspired so many words that some dictionaries couldn't settle on a winner.
The Oxford English Dictionary has opted not to choose a word of the year. Apparently, the sheer scale and scope of new vocab made it impossible to select just one word.
Yes, in a year of fires and plague and everything in between, there were certainly plenty to choose from.
COVID.
I would have got to be it.
COVID. Tell you what, I reckon unprecedented should get a run.
The word of the year is Zoom, I think, isn't it?
Well, based on our consumption this year, we reckon there are some better runners.
How long will it take to reach a new normal?
Video conferencing became the new normal.
This is the new normal.
Back to the new normal. Could become the new normal.
The new normal, right?
And I think we can create this as the new normal as well.
Normal, but certainly not new. And did you notice how many people were performing this move in 2020?
From the new normal to pivot.
This is the time to pivot.
Now, that might pivot.
Almost pivot.
I mean, we've all had to pivot in 2020, haven't we?
Oh, we certainly have. All that pivoting, and 2020 has left us in a spin. Earlier in the year, we highlighted that nonsense term, learnings.
There are learnings, I think.
Are there any learnings from what has happened?
You say there are learnings, doesn't look like the lessons were learned.
Thankfully, we haven't heard too much of that word since then. And so, only a couple more words from us in what is our final show of the year, and they are thank you for your support, for watching the show, and for your ideas and tip-offs. And thanks to the ABC for allowing us to do what we do. It is a strong and confident public broadcaster that allows criticism from within. We'll be back in the new year. We hope to see you then. But for now, goodbye.